We have firstly the announcements as per usual. So just a reminder for everybody that the meeting is being recorded. If you are not speaking, if you could keep your microphone on muted just to avoid any unexpected noises. If you need to ask a question, obviously, if you can raise your virtual hand. If your virtual hand isn't working, raise your physical hand. Similarly with voting. And just a reminder in terms of the obligations for hybrid meetings and online meetings, if you can keep your cameras on, please, if that is at all possible, unless you have connection issues. So we'll move to the meeting proper. Firstly, can I just mention that we are unable to welcome Councillor Steve Hunt today. He's got unfortunately a dental appointment, but we do welcome Councillor Alan Llewellyn instead. So welcome, Alan, in terms of representation from the leadership in NPT. We've also had apologies from Di Clements from the Pembrokeshire Coastal National Park, Jan Williams from Swansea Bay University Health Board, Neil Wooding, Howelddar University Health Board, and Paul Boyle from Swansea University. Can I just check if there are any other apologies we received for today over and above those? If not, oh yeah, Steve, would you want to come in? Steve Spill.
Yeah, my chair. Just to say, I'm sitting in for Jan Williams, so we are represented. Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, appreciated that and welcome. Okay, we'll move then to item 2, which is declarations of interest. There are any declarations from any members on the call today that need to declare?
I see no indication, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We'll move then to our first full item, which is the third quarter or quarter 3 financial monitoring report for 24-25. That's on pages 3 to 8 of your agendas. And I'll call in Chris Moore to take us through this report. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. If you don't mind, I'm going to ask Steve Aldridge Jones to actually present this one for me, please.
No problem at all. Come on in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So this report is for quarter 3. As the Chair said, it's on page 3 of the report, but I draw your attention to the Appendix A on page 7. So this report forecasts is for the financial monitoring and year-end position for 24-25, and this was presented to joint scrutiny last week. So as you're aware, on the 23rd of January 2024, the Joint Committee approved the 24-25 budget, which was set at 615,000 with a levy from each of the constituent authorities. And then this levy was reduced by 10% through the utilisation of reserves, leaving roughly 556,000 to be raised through the levy. This year, we also have a Welsh Government grant of £100,000 for the Regional Transport Subcommittee, which we are fully expecting to utilise. We're also expecting to fully utilise each subcommittee's budget. So the main point I want to draw from this report is on the appendix. You can see that we are showing a projected surplus of £128,000 for the year. There's several reasons for this. Probably one of the main ones is the support services. That's underspent by 44,000. This is due to us having a budgeted post for a senior accountant. This has been remaining vacant as not yet required due to level of activity. The subcommittee expenditure, I did say that each subcommittee is likely to utilise all the budget, but we do have a, for the better word, a pot in there, which is looking to be roughly 87,000 underspent. This is in respect to the planning and programme management expenditure. Again, this is due to the level of activity within the CJC. Moving down to the Regional Management Office, looking to be underspent by 60,000. The main reason being the 53,000 underspent on the consultancy and specialist advisor work not being required or commissioned. And again, then there's some small underspends on printing and copying, office consumables, and ICT. So as I said, looking at the very bottom of the appendix, we can see that reserves have accumulated due to expenditure not having begun in the first year of operation of the CJC and limited activity within 23-24. So therefore, we are anticipating that the reserves at the end of this year will be in the region of 970,000 at the end of this financial year. That's my report. Chair, does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Aldred. Again, appreciate the run through there, and I know we're coming to a future report now into which shows how we propose to reduce those reserves in due course. But thank you for the run through. They're very helpful. I'll open it up. Any comments or questions from anyone to Aldred on the report? No? Okay, if there aren't any, then can I ask the fellow leaders and their representatives then if they could show whether they are in favour of the recommendations of the report? I'm happy. First of all, let me move it formally. Can I ask for a seconder for the report first, please? Yeah, thank you, Darren, Councillor Price. And then we'll go to the vote, please. All those in favour, please, if you could show, colleagues. Thank you. That is agreed. Okay, thank you, Aldred. Appreciate that. We'll move then to item 4, which is the budget for the financial year 25-26, pages 9 to 22 of the agenda. Chris, do you want to take us through this one?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a requirement actually as part of the CJC legislation that we set the budget annually. We must notify the constituent authorities by the end of January of the levy for the following year in respect of the CJC's function. We have been through quite a few iterations with the budget over a period of the last month plus. And I know we've had discussions with each of the authorities and with members over the requirement. What you will find within the report is there's 3 options that are actually presented, with a recommendation that we implement the option 3C as Appendix C. The options we've looked at, and it's pretty consistent with previous years as to whether we actually look at a continuity budget or whether we actually increase the workflow through the budgets to try and achieve the objectives of the CJC, whilst actually there is still some work to be done in terms of understanding the level of activity on some of the functions and some of the work streams, and it's the functions of the CJCs is ever expanding. As we know in certain areas like the transport, where we've done a certain amount on the transport review, and indications are that Welsh Government distribution of the grants will be through the CJ3 in future. So things are changing, and therefore there are options in terms of the 3 funding options. One is the continuity budget, one is the actual requested budget from the work streams, and then there is a further option then of the requested budget, but discharging some of the sort of high-ish reserves that we've accumulated over the last couple of years, but discharging them over a plan period of 3 years, so that actually we don't hit each of the constituent authorities with any unacceptably high movement in levies, recognising some of the constituent authorities' own challenges around the ever-increasing demand on services and the lack of funding that's coming forward. So Appendix C, which is the actual recommended one, actually accommodates requests that have come in from the 3 work streams. The 4th work stream, which is the planning one, there is some challenges around defining exactly what needs to be done, and work continues with Welsh Government in terms of that, and therefore links to the funding. So the funding is not available in the same context in terms of that one, but after talking to the work stream about it, that's an acceptable position because they are working with Welsh Government to try and identify further funding to support that work stream. But the other work streams can actually deliver their expectations through the budget in Appendix C. The report itself narrates in some detail what the individual work stream is expecting to deliver, and those budgets then are included in that. So the overall position is that the recommendation is that if we actually work to the requested budget in Appendix C, we're looking at a draft budget for 25-26 of 710,000, of which we are looking to try and standardise the levy at the same levy that was which was chargeable in current year, which was something that we is trying to achieve to try and sort of help the constituent authorities. in standardising the levy, that means that we would be considering taking 153,000 out of reserves to fund that. And Steve, in the last report, indicated that the reserves have accumulated. But what I'm very conscious of doing in a prudent manner is that we don't do that in 1 year without actually doing it over a longer period of time. So what you'll notice is that the plan over the 3-year period is to take a continual value of that sort of value out of reserves to support the budget to keep the levy the same. So our projection going forward at this point in time is the work continues on the various work streams, that we draw the levies at the same levy for the next 3 years, but then we inject money from the reserves of 153 in year 1, 167 in year 2, and 182 in year 3. If we do that, we'll take then our reserves, which, as Steve indicated previously, is anticipated to be 960,000 down to under 500,000 over the 3-year period. So that allows really a sensible approach, but allows the CJC flexibility to develop over the next 3 years as we require, and we have an element of tolerance within those reserves. So that's the proposal in terms of the budget. There's quite a bit of detail in terms of what the work streams are doing. The other slight amendment that is proposed this year, and admittedly it's very, very small at this point in time, but as planning develops, there is a responsibility on the national parks to contribute towards our planning function. So we're establishing the fact that, or the proposal is to establish a levy in respect of the national parks. And whilst it's small this year, because we haven't really quantified the full value of the planning function, and it's in the moment it's only in at 20,000, so the levy is under £1,000 for each of the national parks. Over a period of time, one would expect that to increase as the cost of delivering that planning function work stream does increase. But bringing the principle in this year is quite critical within the overall position, because it's something that we've delayed doing on a de minimis basis the last 2 years as we've set the levy originally. So my report is effectively proposing that we hold the levy the same, that we provide the requested funding to the individual work streams, with the exception of recognising the planning is going to be short at the moment, but there's further negotiations and discussion to go on with Welsh Government. But then to hold the levies and contribute from reserves accordingly. So that's what's presented, Chair, as being the proposal today. What I need to actually also highlight is that I took this proposal as part of the consultation process to the Scrutiny Committee, and the Scrutiny Committee only met last week after the agenda was dispatched for this CJC. So I'm under duty to sort of update you on any feedback that comes from that Scrutiny Committee. And there was some concerns with some of the members from that scrutiny, not all of them, but some of the members, that actually there is an element of contingency within this budget that perhaps we shouldn't be carrying, and we should be reducing the levy even further because of the individual constituent authorities' own pressures in terms of dealing with their own priorities back in the individual authorities. Now, I actually represented my feeling that actually this was relatively prudent. We were planning a discharge of budget reserves over the 3 years. I felt that because the CJC is still continuing to increase in terms of capacity and develop in terms of some of the challenges, and some of them are still unknown, very much unknown to us at this point in time, that it is reasonable to carry a certain amount of contingency and flex within the budget, and actually that it would be reasonable to hold the levy at the same position as previous years. I obviously agreed to report back their views, and their views were sort of set. There was no formal recommendation that came out of committee, but those were views of certain members that we ought to be tightening up and possibly reducing the levy further. I'll leave that for a discussion here. But from my own professional viewpoint, I think we've got to an established place that is allows a bit of safety, but allows for what is the CJC is a developing model going forward. And I'm sure we'll have some more unknowns coming forward in the future, and is a reasonably sensible and prudent approach. What I wouldn't want to do is suggest that actually we don't discharge budget reserves over a 3-year period and we have a hit next year or the year after, because I know, as well as many other members, that actually I think next year's budget settlement is going to be more difficult for the constituent authorities than this year. So I'll leave that for debate, and happy to answer any questions. Diolch, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you for that. And I think, again, I'm grateful for you clarifying the difference between your advice and your report back from scrutiny. I would say I'm grateful to scrutiny, first of all, for acknowledging the pressures that all local authorities remain under in terms of their budget setting processes. And I think that reflects the conversation that leaders have had in terms of determining, which is the best of the options in the paper, in terms of how we go forward. And as you say, that glide path in terms of reducing reserves over a period of time, which you have advised us may be the best way forward, is one I know leaders, I think, are corralled around. With reducing, even with having a standstill budget in terms of the levy, that is indeed a real terms cut anyway, because we must remember that we didn't increase the levy when inflation was extremely high a few years ago by the level of inflation. And this year, we have chosen to freeze the levy. That is against the backdrop of inflation still being above the government's target. And of course, local authorities receiving increases in their funding, albeit not as much as authorities would like to see to balance the pressures that we're all facing. So in that respect, we are, in real terms, reducing the levy anyway. So we're getting to the same place. So my position would remain that we continue to follow your advice, and we continue to follow option C in the paper, which provides that, I think, the best balance for us as a CJC. And as you say, given that we're intending to do more, we know that UK government and Welsh government are now of the opinion that CJCs are the right regional structures for operating, economic development and other structures, both from both governments. We are inevitably going to be picking up more and more to do. So making sure we've got the resources to do that is really, really important. I'll open it up to others if they wish to add comment on that. Councillor Price, Darren.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie. I'd support what you've said there and what Chris has outlined. I absolutely appreciate the sentiment from the scrutiny committee. I'm sure we all do, given the pressure that we all face in terms of our individual budgets. But I tend to concur with what Chris has set out there in terms of the likely increase in functions that'll face us as a CJC over the next few years. And I'm fully supportive of the recommendation as set out in Appendix C. As you mentioned, Rob, the likelihood is that we will see functions in terms of economic development. We know we've got functions coming in terms of transport down the line, so there'll be a call on that, which is in addition to the call that we know is coming in terms of the planning function. And I think once again we go back to this fundamental point, and we have the debate every year, don't we, in terms of if there are additional functions that come from Welsh Government, additional duties on the CJC, then we need the resources to be able to deliver that. And I know that we're all at risk of something like a broken record, because I think every time we set a budget, we mention this, but we just need to keep making that point to Welsh Government. And to be fair, I know that you do, Rob, in meetings that we have with ministers, that point is raised consistently. But I think for me, fundamentally, that's a really important discussion that we have now, particularly when we look at that planning function, which will bring with it significant costs. But absolutely agree with what you've said previously, and happy to support the recommendation in Appendix C. Diolch.
Great. Thank you, Darren. And yes, we continue to make that point. No functions without the relative finances to go with it, isn't it? And it's a fair position to take, and we'll continue to make it to both governments. Councillor Harvey, John.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I concur with the points that you've made, and also that Darren's just made there. I think this is a prudent approach that Chris is putting to us, and it to move that option C is the one we go forwards for. Obviously, requested budget plus use of reserves. I think to keep an element of reserves in reserve, if you like, that £500,000 you referred to, Chris, I think that's very sensible. And like Darren said, I mean, my concern is really about the planning function, the cost of an SDP going forward. I mean, I've heard figures around 2 million, 2.5 million potentially from start of process to end of process. So we do need to keep some money back for that. But, you know, I certainly welcome the ongoing discussions that have been held with Welsh Government about proper funding for these particular elements of work that we have to do. So just to reiterate, very happy to support option C. Thank you, Rob.
Great, thank you, John. Appreciate that. Alid next. Alid, if you want to come in.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, and thanks very much, Chris, for that very prudent report, and I think we would support it as well. I would make a special plea, and I'm sure all of us are special pleading around this point of finance, but we do have, as Banner, we have 3 CJCs that we have to relate to, and I trust that you'll be mindful in the future that we do have to have that extra burden. I suspect financially of all the national parks, we are the most vulnerable for historical reasons, but it is very difficult for us because we have to have 3 CJCs that we have to relate to, especially if there's an increase in the planning demands in the future. We will have to reflect long and hard on that, Chris. But I thank you for your report and I commend you for it, but I would ask you to be particularly mindful of that particular for us in the Banner. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alid, and I think that is something we are mindful of, and will continue to pay due regard to the fact that you are involved in a number of CJCs, and therefore, you know, having that consistent and reasonable approach to any levies that then come into play. So I think that's a point well made again. I can't see any other hands up. If that is the case, then I'm more than happy on Chris's behalf to move the report. Could I ask for a seconder, please? Thank you, John. We will go therefore to the vote. If you could all show if you're in favour of the recommendation C, as Chris has laid out. Thank you very much. That is agreed. Thank you, colleagues. We'll move then to item 5, which is the update on the corporate plan for 23 to 28. This is on pages 23 to 30 of your report today. And I'll call in Wendy Walters to take us through this item. Wendy, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Diolch. So members will have in front of them paper and an update on the current actions required in pursuit of the priorities that you agreed back in 2022. So the wellbeing objectives, i.e. the priorities, have not changed. Therefore, we won't be consulting further, or there is no need to consult further with the public. But what you have in front of you is the required actions necessary to help deliver those. So they're there for members' consideration. They've had scrutiny input prior to you receiving them today. But if I could just take an opportunity to add to the debate around the budget allocations, what I think members will see from what is in front of you is that the activity is getting significantly more for the CJC over the next 12 months, and I anticipate that maybe some further activities will come to light during the year, which I will keep members fully briefed on. So I think having the funding in place in order to be able to react and respond to that is very important. So thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Wendy. Appreciate that. Are there any questions or comments for Wendy on the report? Fully concur with Wendy's statements there, but the increase in the workload, that is clear that that's coming and will continue to build. So we need to make sure that we're properly prepared for that. Okay, I don't see any hands up. So again, I'll move this report and would look for a seconder, please. Thank you, Darren. So that's been moved and seconded. Could I ask colleagues then to show if they're in favour of the report, please, and the recommendations? Thank you very much. That is agreed. Okay, we'll move then to item 6, which is the Energy Subcommittee Programme Update. And I welcome Darren Thomas to present the update report for us.
Thank you, Chair, very much indeed. Good morning, everybody. So the purpose of this report is to provide members with an update on the regional delivery for energy and seek approval for funding. The report sets out in the introduction and background that the local area energy plans, called LEAPs, are the framework to deliver the regional energy strategy. We've also been fortunate that Welsh Government have also funded for 24 months the appointment of a regional energy team. So there is an energy project manager and 2 energy project officer posts held within or employed by Carmarthenshire County Council. The progress that the energy team have been making is detailed in Appendix A. I don't plan to go through that in detail, Chair, but very happy to answer any questions. And then the updates on the individual priority schemes are outlined in Appendixes B, C and D. Appendix B provides the update on the South West Wales Solar Together project. And this is the project that we are seeking from the CJC funding in 25-26 of 27,500. And there's a small amount in this financial year as well to cover the cost of the Memorandum of Understanding. The project details are set out in Appendix B. The procurement route is being managed through Carmarthenshire County Council as the lead body, and they are developing the Memorandum of Understanding and have issued a market engagement PIN notice on the 7th of January. The other projects that are provided with detail are the Regional Retrofit Behavioural Change Project, which is in Appendix C, and the cross-boundary EV charging infrastructure pilot in Appendix D. That particular project has some overlap as well with the regional transport work as well. I would let you know, Chair. That's the core update. This report also went to the recent scrutiny committee, which Chris Moore referred to in his update earlier. The report seemed to be well received. There was no significant pushback. There seemed to be compliments that we were working well together as a region and developing some good actions as an initial starting point. And they supported that the funding side be taken forward, Chair. So in terms of recommendations, the recommendation is are that the members note the progress updates on the energy work stream and to seek approval for funding of the solar group purchasing initiative. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you, Darren. Thanks for that run through and for the work on the report. Open it up if members have any questions or comments for Darren on anything in the report today. Seems quite straightforward, looks some good stuff in there. So again, happy to move the report today. Could I look for a seconder, please? Thank you very much. And then before we'll go to the vote, please, if you can all show if you're in favour of the recommendations on page 31. Thank you very much. Those are agreed. Thank you very much for that, Darren. We'll move then to the draft regional transport plan. This is on pages 45 to 538 of your agenda, so a large document. And we've got Mark Wade and Stuart Davis with us today to take us through the highlights of the report. So I'll hand over to Mark and Stuart. I don't know who wants to go first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll just say a few words at the start and then hand to Stuart and Lee White is on the call as well, who'll be able to take us through in a bit more detail. It's an extremely important piece of work for us, the draft regional transport plan. And I'd just like to start by thanking officers for their work and efforts to get us to this point. I think the size of the document does reflect the amount of effort which has gone into it. And yeah, an important strategic document in sort of economic and transport terms as well, setting out draft proposals for investment priorities and links across to a wide range of other agendas. So I'll not say too much more other than that, and I'll hand to Stuart and then onwards to Lee to talk us through plans for the detail of the report itself, public consultation, and then the work which will go towards approval of a final version of the plan this summer. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Stuart?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'll bring Lee in a minute. The main purpose, we've got to the stage of the draft, so it's hopefully subject to approval, be ready to go into the consultation programme with an 8 to 10 week sort of window on that one. There's still some more development to do. We've got some work, obviously, and I think in the appendices it outlines the delivery plan, which is a long list of the sort of programmes and projects that we anticipate being part of this, which have got alignment to the the draft regional transport plan as it is here. So there's more work to do there. It's currently a long list, so we need to go through and apply. It's Appendix 5. There's the sort of scoring and evaluation. So we need to try and understand what clustering of schemes and things needs to happen, and how we come up with a robust prioritisation of those schemes in order to form the sort of basis of the bids as we go ahead over the next 5 years. So I think we've made some good progress. We've had positive indications from Welsh Government that they're comfortable with the direction of this. They've come back with some initial comments, which we'll include as part of the consultation, and hopefully we'll get some more feedback. There's a number of consultation events and plans in place which are being developed now to try and encourage as much engagement as possible, and particularly with some of the sort of younger elements in our community where we didn't get as much engagement possibly in the consultations before. So what I'll do, if it's okay with you, Chair, I'll just bring Lee in just to cover a bit more of the detail, or some bits and pieces that he wants to highlight following the development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Yeah, Lee, come on in.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, thanks for that as introduction, Mark and Stuart. I think just to emphasise, Chair, Mark's point about this very much being a team sport, it certainly has required a lot of officer input to actually get to this point. So I think, that's been recognised by both the subcommittee and the scrutiny committee in recent weeks. And I think just to echo that to the full CJC today, I think in terms of the report, Chair, it's hopefully self-explanatory. Just to highlight some points there that are quite key. There's a number of appendices, as you can appreciate, to effectively provide that background material. I would encourage colleagues to read those, although they will form part of the public consultation. The delivery plan, as Stuart alluded to, does require a degree of additional work, in particular to finalise the prioritisation of schemes. So that will be taking place in the current months. Obviously, will feed the proposed consultation outcomes into that. I think the consultation's due to go live. I think we're planning for the 10th of February to launch that for 8 weeks. As highlighted by Stuart, there will be a number of events taking place across the region for the consultation, both public events and stakeholder engagement events. We held a number of those last summer when we moved on the case for change that this committee considered back in February last year, and then again over the summer for submission to the Welsh Government. So, we will tread a familiar path in terms of consultation, with a couple of important additions. One is reaching out to the business community through the appropriate bodies that represent that community, the business interests within the region, and secondly, the youth community. We, in the previous consultation, the youth community was somewhat underrepresented, so we are doing some quite detailed work with the schools and the colleges to try and improve that. I think in terms of the RTP itself, probably the most relevant elements to support it are the integrated impact assessment. The scoping report for that is published with the consultation materials. We're now starting to assess the policies and the schemes that are in the long list of schemes for the delivery plan, and that will proceed in parallel to the consultation. There's obviously a number of funding implications that I think Chris Moore touched on in his earlier report, Chair. We're still pretty much in limbo in terms of formal announcements from the Welsh Government on the funding position from April 26 onwards. I'm sure Mark and Stuart may wish to say a little more about that, but we are having some smoke signals from Welsh Government, but nothing more at this stage. And I know that's part of the political discussions that are taking place. The key thing for the RTP, it does roll a number. There's approximately 7 individual funds that will be rolled into one fund at the moment. So obviously that sort of highlights the importance of the RTP that Mark was discussing there. We followed risk impact. The main risk with this, Chair, is that if we don't get a finalised RTP back through the CJC process in the summer and submit it to the Welsh Government in the summertime, there is a real risk about grants from the 1st of April 2026 being delayed. So that's the main risk factor in terms of issues arising through the consultation. Don't expect any. Welsh Government have been positive, as Stuart had said, about giving us agreement to move to the consultation phase. So I don't think there's any real issues in terms of, the wider picture, Chair. Obviously, we can't predict what will come back from the consultation, but we will be back to report to the CJC in June. And just one important governance point, Chair, as well as coming back through the Transport Committee subcommittee, the Scrutiny Committee and yourselves in June. In May, we do intend to take the list of schemes as finalised through the cabinets of the individual authorities, simply because, Chair, the powers to deliver the schemes still actually lies with the individual authorities. So there will be a process of cabinet approval in the individual authorities and then into the CJC process after that. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, as always.
Billy, thank you very much for that. As a number of you said, there's a substantial report with a lot of work going into it. So I can really thank you, the teams, and everybody who's fed into that report. It is a really good document. As previously, I'm more than happy to formally move the report. And I'll look for a second, but I'll open it up to questions first from colleagues for anything that's in the report they might want to question you on. So, Councillor Price, Darren, of course, should come to you as well, because obviously you chair the transport subgroup. So, Councillor Price.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Yeah, absolutely. And as a few people have mentioned, I'm grateful for the work that's gone in to get us to this stage. I'm mindful of the significant pressure that is added to already stretched teams within the local authority. So grateful for that work. Clearly, there are some key elements here now as we move forward. As I set out in the report, there's quite a comprehensive engagement plan there, and I think it's an onus on all of us as local authorities to try and get that message out there and to try and get that engagement from our communities. Clearly, this is the chance that they will have now to test whether they agree with the list of schemes as have been set out in the delivery plan, or whether in fact we've missed anything. And I think it's important that we engage with our communities to ensure they do feedback as much as possible. And then, of course, following that, there's a key piece of work, as Lee has mentioned there, in terms of that prioritisation, as I set out in Appendix 5 there, which would be pivotal. But I think then the third key bit for me is that, and I come back to this time and time again, is that very important discussion with Welsh Government in terms of what is the size of the envelope that we have to deliver some of this stuff, because clearly there's a significant ask in terms of capital expenditure needed here to deliver against these expectations and or these objectives rather. And it is a case of managing expectations locally, I think, because clearly if we don't get the envelope that we want, we won't be able to deliver against some of this stuff. So I think there's a really important piece of work there in terms of understanding what we're likely to get over future years in terms of capital provision. But once again, just to place on record my thanks for the work that's got us to this stage. And as I did in the subgroup, there are two people in particular who are coming to the end of their journey in terms of officer representation. One is Darren Thomas in Pembrokeshire, and the other is Dave Griffiths in Neath, Talbot, who have both contributed significantly to this piece of work. They're both finishing in their roles over the next month or two. So I think it's important that we bid them well in their future paths. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Darren. Absolutely concur with your comments there, and I'm sure the whole committee wishes them all the best for that. Okay, I'm happy to formally move the report. Could I look for a formal seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Price. And with that, could I ask colleagues to show if they're in favour of the report, please, and the recommendations? Thank you very much. Thank you, guys, for the update and for the work again. That is our last substantive item on the report today, but we move then to the forward work programme on pages 539 to 540. And can I ask Christy to take us through this if there are any updates, please.
Good morning, Chair. 4 items to come forward on the 18th of March. The corporate plan update, and that is for decision, and it'll include really the budget detail and the actions that we've discussed today, and it's just seeking approval then before we publish the priorities for 2025-26. The annual report for 24-25, and that's basically going to give you an overview of the progress of the CJC during that period. Economic wellbeing and development will provide a progress update as well. That's for information only. And then, as Mark has already discussed, we'll bring back the RTP as an update, but focusing more so on the delivery plan programme as a list then for an update then, really. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christy. Appreciate that. This one will be for noting. So I ask leader colleagues to show if they're happy to note what's been proposed and that we're in agreement with that. Okay, thank you very much. That's confirmed. And that brings us to the end of the formal agenda. I've not been notified of any additional business for today. Unless there are any urgent items, I don't see anybody reaching for their buttons. With that, then, can I just say thank you very much for your attendance. Look forward to seeing you next month.